She wrote one of the darkest yet most luminous novels in literary history, but for a moment, her own manuscript turned against her, as if life itself decided this writer was too dangerous to exist. Millions cry while reading Jane Eyre, while Charlotte Brontë herself once trembled with terror at the thought that her name would be forever hidden behind a male pseudonym. This is not merely a biography, it's a story of how, in the rigid world of Victorian England, a single woman extracted from her pain and fury an energy powerful enough to reshape hearts and minds more than a century later. Stay with us, and you'll discover how her clandestine survival strategies can become your personal action plan. Charlotte grew up in a parsonage where books lived in heavy leather bindings and the windows were permanently shut against the whistling winds of the Yorkshire coast. The three Bronte sisters, Charlotte, Emily, and Anne, transformed their modest home into a self-made laboratory of imagination. If you had old trunks filled with secret maps, would you open them? They asked themselves daily, and their answer was a resounding yes. They wrote under invented names, organized secret societies, and in their tiny homeschool they called clavis, they debated topics that made the adults label them bad girls. Their play acting was more than just child's play, it was a rehearsal for subverting the strict gender expectations of the time. In Charlotte's earliest stories, written on discarded paper scraps, heroines solved riddles, escaped imprisonment, and negotiated treaties with imagined kingdoms. Later, these sketches morphed into the complex interior lives of her published protagonists. By the way, tell us in the comments, what secret project were you obsessed with as a child? When Charlotte was just 7, her world collapsed. Her mother died of what doctors called consumption, and her father slipped into madness, leaving the children without a guardian. The sisters were sent to the harsh but fair-hearted schoolmaster John Williams Teague, whose stern discipline hid a deep compassion. 6-year-old Emily was already composing verses, and Anne, barely 5, spun stories that glittered with macabre humor. Charlotte absorbed their emotions like a sponge, learning early that language could be both a shield and a weapon. At the local school, boys ignored her because of her unfeminine voice, but she turned this alienation into a source of power. That very rejection taught her that any voice, no matter how it's labeled, could become thunderous when forged in pain and passion. Due to financial struggles, the family had to rely on the generosity of their uncle, Patrick Bronte, a clergyman with a keen literary taste. He supplied them with a modest library that included Byron, Scott, and the Gothic romances that would later echo in Charlotte's own work. Daily chores like chopping wood, milking cows, and caring for a sick brother instilled a disciplined work ethic that later manifested in her rigorous writing schedule. She wrote for 3 to 4 hours every single day. When tragedy struck again, the untimely death of her beloved sister Emily at 21, Charlotte felt every scar echo in the future narrative of the tenant of Wildfell Hall. Each wound became a rehearsal for the relentless moral courage she would later embed in her heroines. Grief also sharpened her observational eye. She began to notice how the small gestures of servants, the unspoken rules of courtship, and the hidden economies of marriage formed a silent choreography that governed Victorian life. She sealed her own identity in a secret box, signing her first manuscripts with a male pseudonym, and the world believed a man was behind the words. In 1845, armed with scathing wit and a resolve to outwit a sexist publishing industry, Charlotte moved to the bustling streets of Piccadilly. Her first novel, later known as The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, was rejected by a publisher who called it unfit for the public. Recognizing that gender prejudice would block her path, she invented the name Currer Bell, a disguise that functioned like a knight's armor, allowing her to storm the castle of repression. The letters she penned under this alias were not mere correspondence, they were weaponized epistles. She mapped every emotional surge, encoding personal dread and her yearning for freedom in a style that read like a detective's notebook. Each paragraph became a coded signal, a whisper to future feminists that the truth could survive even behind a mask. Her correspondence with her publisher reveals a highly strategic mind. She argued fiercely for a fair price, cited the commercial success of male authors with similar themes, and even threatened to publish anonymously in a newspaper if she wasn't given a chance. The eventual acceptance of Jane Eyre was less a triumph of talent than a small, calculated victory in a battle of social economics. If you had to conceal your true self, what pseudonym would you choose and why? We're waiting for your answers in the comments. When the novel finally appeared in 1847, female readers wept in ladies' reading rooms, while critics declared, "This book is clearly the work of a man." Charlotte understood that her heroine, Jane, was not a mere governess but a symbol of an autonomous spirit. Jane's ascent from the bleak moors of Thornfield Hall to confront the patriarchal economy of the Rochester estate was a direct challenge to the prevailing formula that equated a woman with a commodity. In every scene where Jane refuses to become a kitchen slave, Charlotte wove in fragments of her own struggle against a tyrannical father and the jealousy that simmered among the Bronte sisters. The novel's structure, alternating interior monologue with external Gothic events, mirrored Charlotte's own oscillation between private grief and public defiance. Critics of the day praised her passionate imagination but completely missed that the novel's moral backbone was a radical call for women's right to self-determination. The famous line, "Reader, I married him," is a subversive reversal of the Victorian expectation that women should remain silent about their own choices. The emotional climax arrives in the iconic confrontation in the Red Rose Garden, where Jane declares, "I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being with an independent will." That cry pierced the Victorian conscience, urging readers to reconsider their own place within a rigid social hierarchy. Modern scholars trace that garden scene to Charlotte's own experience of walking the Haworth moors, where the wind seemed to carry a promise of liberation. What moment in your life made you say enough? Share it below, because your voice can also reshape the world. In 1851, Charlotte fell for Peter Shelford, yet their romance was encoded like a cipher, as if she were writing the Orient Express of the heart. Peter, from a well-to-do Irish family, quickly sensed that behind the masculine facade of Currer Bell lay a deeply wounded woman. Their correspondence, unearthed only in 1905, shows Charlotte using the metaphor of a green dwarf to veil the raw sensuality she feared would be condemned. At the same time, in 1848 she gave birth to a mixed-race daughter, Elizabeth, whose very existence sparked a massive scandal and a near-fatal attempt on her life by a jealous relative. The Green Dwarf, an unpublished fragment discovered among her papers, explores a form of sexual liberty that arguably prefigures modern homoerotic subtext in English literature. Through cloaked allusions, Charlotte transformed private anguish into a mystical force, forging new dimensions of female identity that resisted the era's binary constraints. That fragment contains a striking passage where the narrator describes a green fire that burns without leaving ash, a metaphor scholars now interpret as an early articulation of queer desire surviving societal eradication. The romance with Peter Shelford, though brief, catalyzed a series of poems that Charlotte later repurposed into the stirring passages of Jane Eyre, where Rochester's dark past is hinted at but never fully disclosed. The tension between concealment and revelation in that relationship mirrors her own professional strategy: hide the self until the moment of artistic truth. Would you risk revealing your secret passion even if it might ruin your reputation? Write it in the comments. Your answer could empower someone else. Today, almost 2 centuries later, every woman who reads Jane Eyre receives a hidden message: you can become anything you wish, if you have enough courage. Charlotte's death in 1855 could have been a quiet epilogue, but her rebellious soul rewrote the final chapter. Contemporary authors, from J.K. Rowling to Margaret Atwood, acknowledge her impact, admitting that without Charlotte, they would never have dared to write strong female protagonists. Her literary techniques, using bleak Gothic landscapes as metaphors for inner battles, continue to inspire filmmakers, set designers, and graphic novelists. Charlotte Brontë is far more than just the author of Jane Eyre. She is a true alchemist who turned the darkness of childhood, family secrets, and societal shackles into the golden light of female autonomy. Her secrets is disguise, shadow writing, and a relentless listening to her inner voice even when the world tried to silence it, remain a powerful blueprint for personal empowerment. Her story shows us the importance of having the courage to conceal and then reveal, using a pseudonym or mask as a protective shield when necessary, and shedding it at exactly the right moment. She teaches us that pain can be used as fuel, turning every scar into a plot twist, harnessing the hurt rather than running away from it. Charlotte loved without restraint, even when society rushed to judge, and demonstrated an amazing synchronicity of intention and action, aligning her inner purpose with outward steps to forge her own unique path to success. By strategically using diaries to control reader empathy, turning domestic spaces into sites of resistance, and openly questioning social norms, Charlotte left us tactics that can be applied anywhere today, from a personal blog to a business pitch. Which aspect of Charlotte's story will you integrate into your life today? Let us know in the comments. It might just be your first step toward rewriting your own destiny. And if you want to dive even deeper into the incredible story of Charlotte Brontë, I highly recommend watching a couple of fantastic films. Definitely check out the 2011 picture Jane Eyre, directed by Cary Fukunaga. It amazingly captures the atmosphere of Gothic shadows that reflect the author's inner turmoil. And the BBC documentary The Bronte Sisters from 1979, where rare archival footage, letters, and expert interviews show exactly how the sisters' real-life experiences forged their masterpieces. Watch them, and you'll see how Charlotte's non-linear journey can serve as a true navigation system for the modern world. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned. More inspiring stories and actionable ideas are on the way.